Another issue we have with backdoors is that if there is any vulnerability and it was exploited, it takes years just to resolve the problem. For example, when the researchers found a security flaw in the National Institute of Standards Technology cryptography standard in 2007, it wasn't completely resolved until 2014. 7 years is a long period of time that terrorists can utilize. On the other side of the debate, intelligence agencies argue that backdoors can be kept secret and sufficiently complex so that their unauthorized use is highly unlikely. However, if we look at the history of how successful the intelligence agencies have been, we have seen numerous occurrences of when they have failed. For example, according to the article, When Backdoors Backfire, published in The Economist in the summer of 2015, it became known that the Office of Personnel Management, which stores sensitive data of 20 million federal employees, had been breached allegedly by the Chinese. Some say it was the biggest disaster in American intelligence history, and some would even argue that it was worse than the data breach by Edward Snowden. Even if the government does achieve a backdoor, terrorists will use technology made outside the United States jurisdiction. However, if this does happen, security agencies lose access to all that metadata of the terrorists because they won't even be on US servers anymore. The recent terror attacks in Paris is a good example of this because the terrorists knew that their data would be collected by servers, so instead they used their own unknown private software to perform their task in secrecy. We finish off our debate with our final argument of security concerns. Government agencies such as the National Security Agency believe that if communications were heavily encrypted, the agency cannot do its work to protect the country. However, that isn't actually the case, because in 2009, the CIA, FBI, and the New York Police Department were able to seize a plan to detonate a bomb in the subway system. And they were able to do that without accessing encrypted data, just by performing basic police work of working together, sharing intelligence, and following up on tips of informants. They were able to stop Al-Qaeda. The main argument being made on the topic of national security is that if the government has a backdoor, anyone else, if they tried hard enough, can also make use of this backdoor. By other people, we mean enemy governments, terrorists, and just basic other people with malicious intent. By creating a backdoor, the internet is less secure, and we become vulnerable to these people, allowing terrorists to make even more successful attacks. ISIS even produced a tutorial that lists the top 5 safest encryption tools, all made by companies outside the US. People with malicious intent could take advantage of these backdoors created for uses of espionage as well. An article on internet security systems from InfoWorld talks about the use of backdoors to remotely control laptops. For example, many laptops have webcams and microphones, so with backdoors installed, people can watch and listen to everything you do without you even aware. Another argument that is made is that the government shouldn't place limits on encryption technology just for a small collection of people, any more than they should place limits on other items used for crimes, such as cars used for getaway vehicles or shovels to bury evidence. Yes, I'm even throwing in shovels because it's pretty much the same thing. It's some type of device that someone is using to commit a crime. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's still being used to commit a crime. And so for the government to solely put limits on one thing, they might as well put limits on everything else.
Technologically, it is possible to make an impenetrable device or system where the encryption is so strong that there's no key, there's no door at all. Then how do we apprehend the child pornographer? How do we solve or disrupt a terrorist plot?
Disrupting terrorist plots was Richard Clarke's mission for years, and we're adding his voice this morning in the ongoing debate over whether Apple should design a way for the government to break into that iPhone. Richard Clarke led counterterrorism efforts for two presidents, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush.
For 9 years, I was the senior counterterrorism official in the U.S. government. And I went to bed every night worrying about terrorist attacks. Had I done enough to stop a terrorist attack that might be out there that I don't know about? I know what counterterrorism feels like because I was there. But I also operated within limits. And within the United States government, we've decided long ago that there are limits on what we're going to do in the war against terrorism. Under the Obama administration, for example, we've said we're not going to torture people. We could, at the far extreme, to make the FBI's job easier, put ankle bracelets on everybody so that we'd know where everybody was all the time. That's a ridiculous example, but my point is encryption and privacy are larger issues than fighting terrorism. Helps law enforcement organizations in the United States, and Apple helps law enforcement organizations overseas when they have a duly authorized request for material that Apple has. Apple doesn't have this material. If it were in the cloud, if the FBI and San Bernardino County hadn't made a mistake on the way they treated this phone, this information would be in the iCloud, and Apple would allow access to that because Apple has that information.
What do you know about the debate within the Obama administration? It's been reported that there really is a fierce debate over how to handle this.
Well, I don't think it's a fierce debate. I think the Justice Department and the FBI are on their own here. The Secretary of Defense has said how important encryption is when asked about this case. The National Security Agency director and 3 past National Security Agency directors, a former CIA director, a former Homeland Security secretary, have all said that they're much more sympathetic with Apple in this case. You really have to understand that the FBI director is exaggerating the need for this and is trying to build it up as an emotional case, organizing the families of the victims and all of that. And it's Jim Comey, and the Attorney General is letting him get away with it.
So if you were still inside the government right now as a counterterrorism official, could you have seen yourself being more sympathetic with the FBI in doing everything in its view that it can to crack this case?
No, David, if I were in the job now, I would have simply told the FBI to call Fort Meade, the headquarters of the National Security Agency, and NSA would have solved this problem for them. And they're not as interested in solving the problem as they are in getting a legal precedent.
Wow, that sounds like quite a charge. You're suggesting they could have just gone to the NSA to crack this iPhone, but they're presenting this case because they want to set a precedent to be able to do in the future?
Every expert I know believes that NSA could crack this phone. They want the precedent that the government can compel a computer device manufacturer to allow the government in.
Richard Clark, thanks so much for talking to us. We appreciate it.